Hey guys, Cam at Inky Knuckles. We're coming at you live tonight with a few very special dudes, very special guests for our first Word to the Wise Wednesday. It'll be called something different next week. I can almost guarantee that. But Wednesdays, we're going to kind of focus on our creators, artists, and their processes. So look forward to having some fun with these two fine young gentlemen, looking at some pieces of theirs, and we'll be talking process the entire night. But without further ado, Mr. Troy Nixey. How you doing, Troy?
I'm very well, thank you. Just wanted to make sure the glasses were straight, were on. And yourself, you're good?
I'm good. I'm good. I get to chat with you guys. So
yeah, it'll be fun.
Well, let's bring in the Argentinian assassin, Gerardo Zaffino.
Hey guys, how are
you doing, buddy?
How's
so do we know if there's people on? Like, does it show on your screen that there's people tuned in?
I can't tell who exactly. Oh, there's Rob. How you doing, Rob? Rob is. You can see it on the side. You can see the conversation, Troy. Yeah. But the I have the live viewers here, but I kind of got to click on something, so I don't know exactly who's online. But if as they chat, it'll pop up.
It'll pop up.
So Rob Zaff is the Cosmic Ghostwriter guy. He's the guy who has all your CGR covers.
I know.
How many is there? How many is that?
It was six covers.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, it was
6 covers for. I did another like 2 more for another series with the same character, but that series was 6 covers.
Oh wow!
Oh yeah, thank you, Rob.
It's funny. I was unfamiliar with the Cosmic Ghostwriter until you showed me some of Dylan's stuff. I had no idea who the character was at all.
It's a fairly new character too. So
yeah.
That's a few years, only a few years.
So I don't feel too bad. It's not like I didn't know who Batman was or something like that. Yeah.
It was kind of weird because when Dylan first signed up with us, Cosmic Ghostwriter was such a big thing, and he was tackling that miniseries or just finished tackling it. So it was just one of those. It was one of those characters that kind of caught on, much like Spider-Gwen kind of did. Mm-hmm. So many of those characters just kind of fall through the wayside. But
so was Dylan the first artist to tackle Cosmic Ghostwriter, or was there someone?
Jeff Shaw was. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It was the Donny Cates, Jeff Shaw, Thanos run, and he was kind of not a throwaway character, but he was. You could kind of tell there was something there. It's kind of unique. It was a really kind of fun part of that really dark Thanos story, and then the standalone I thought was quite good too. So it kind of launched it to the next level.
Yeah.
So.
And so he's pretty iconic from what I remember. So Gerardo, when you're tackling a character like that, who is definitely in your wheelhouse in terms of the kind of stuff you like to draw, but how do you bring your take on him with still being respectful to the character? And
well, actually, it wasn't that much in my wheelhouse because it's kind of a goofier character, and I'm not
okay.
That sort of mood in my pieces. I'm usually more for a sinister style, and I try to give it that in some of the covers, but I try to keep him as goofy as possible. And it was fun. It was a fun run of covers. Like I say, I don't usually do main covers for this whole series.
Mm-hmm.
I usually just do variants. So coming back to the same character was really cool. I like that.
Well, and that's my bad because I immediately just slapped the skull and I thought, well, of course, Gerardo. The fact that he's a bit goofy is, I guess, I'm familiar with what he looks like, but apparently I'm not familiar with the character at all. So
yeah, it's sort of not all there in the head.
Oh, okay.
But it's fun. It lends to fun situations. I think it was pretty cool. What I read was pretty interesting.
When you guys, from from getting to know both you guys, Gerardo's a lot like you, Troy, where his affection for comics tends to be outside the superhero realm. So I think you guys definitely have that in common. It's always hard to presume what guys like based on what they're doing, because sometimes it's not in their wheelhouse. They just draw it really, really good.
Yeah, it's true. Well, Gerardo, what was your sort of maturation of comics? Like, what was your into comics? What did you start reading?
Well, I started reading Marvel comics because they used to send my dad boxes of comics every month. So I actually learned English reading comics myself. Yeah, so it's part of my upbringing, and it was all superhero comics. Most of it was, except for Punisher and some Daredevil titles, it was that were more anti-heroes.
Yeah,
it was superhero, and then when I was around 14, 15, I started getting into more obscure things, and that's where I found what I really loved. And I usually try to mesh those two things together and give probably superhero characters a little more of a dark tone.
Yeah. So when you first started reading, I'm trying to think, would that have been like, was John Byrne really big when you started reading superhero comics?
Yeah,
like who were the big names?
It was around the time McFarlane and Shinji, all the guys were really huge at Marvel.
Yeah.
Back then, that sort of style wasn't my favorite. I loved the What If series.
Yeah.
I remember it was Hama. I think
Larry Hama, yeah.
Larry Hama was there. Yeah, I mean, I usually try to go outside of superheroes for inspiration, but
yeah,
I don't know. I like everything.
So that would have been a really interesting time for you being that age, because when those guys were coming into the prominence, I was a little bit older. I'm definitely the oldest on this conversation, but so when they kicked over to Image and everyone started getting really excited about Image, that's when I started to get worried, to be honest with you, because for me, I broke in 91. That was when my first book came out through Monster Comics, which is a subsidiary company of Fantagraphics. It lasted like 3 minutes. But I too started still reading superhero stuff, but I started branching out too. That's when, the black and white boom was really happening. And so I was reading really weird, obscure black and white stuff. But then when Image blew up, I was like, oh no, is this the future of comics? Is this what's going to be expected of me? Because that was not at all what I wanted to do. And so there's a lot of 90s nostalgia happening right now, and I just shake my head. It's like, that's because you weren't there.
Yeah, it seems like the 80s, the 90s, what was popular at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's apples and oranges on comic fans and the preferences, but yeah, sorry. I no more comments. Just quick with Rob here, Gerardo. He's asking about the process, and for those watching, this is the first cover,
right,
that Gerardo did for Cosmic Ghostwriter. I always say it wrong, but is it Cosmic Ghostwriter Destroys the
Marvel Universe.
The Marvel Universe. So that is the first one.
Is there a way to make that bigger? I'm just sort of.
Yes, there is. And I will probably a little harder to see, but so Rob's just asking about the process difference there, Gerardo, between that and how you tackled the rest, white on black versus black on white.
Yeah, it wasn't much of the first one was sort of getting to know the character, because I at that point I only did one cover for him, and um, I wasn't that familiar with the character by then. But I that's what I was saying. I wanted to go with with the sort of way the character was being depicted, that it was more a goofy, a loose sort of character, and I wanted to go that way. But then by the second issue, that I think the second one was the one that they asked me for a Spider-Man homage to one of the classic covers.
Does he have a bit of a Lobo vibe? Is that sort of in the wheel? Like, is that sort of similar?
I think it's more of a sort of Deadpool character.
Oh, okay.
Sort of.
So how much editorial input is involved in this? Obviously, you probably know almost everyone over there. Marvel, are they just like, hey, we want a Gerardo Zaffino cover? Do they send you the script? Do you have to send them roughs and they help sort of guide what the image is going to be, or do they just sort of give you free reign to do what you want to do?
They usually just send a few pointers, because when I get to the covers, they usually don't have it. Sometimes they don't even have a full script yet.
Oh, okay.
So they give me the basis of the issue. And when it's a main cover, it usually has to do something to do with the story. Mm-hmm. But when it's about, they just say, they usually just want a cool pose or cool image.
Yeah.
But with this sort of covers, they gave me like a super small plot of the super small, rundown of the issue. And they suggest a few ideas, and I can usually come up with a different idea on my own, and send a few sketches. And it's usually they're not that bad when it comes to suggestions.
And working with a colorist, do you get to pick who you work with? Like, do you have sort of someone who you work with a lot, or do you just sort of leave that up to editorial to find someone who's available? Or
I all these covers I color myself.
Oh, there you go.
Go for myself, because because of the style I have with the inks. I think it goes better with flatter colors.
Yeah.
And they usually tend to overwork the colors a lot.
Well, you put so much value and texture in your black and white work. I can see that, like someone coming in at noodling, they call it noodling, and they come in and just, they're doing all those variants and highlights and shadows, and just it ends up just fighting with what you've put on the paper. So
right. I work in the past. Right now I'm getting a bunch of covers colored by Rain Beredo. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but I'm sorry, Rain. He's great, and we kind of understanding each other a bit more. So I know what I can leave to him, and he knows how to work the colors around my inks. So I like that. And I used to work. I work in a couple of pinups and covers with Dave Stewart.
Oh, yes.
And
Dave.
You don't even need to tell Dave anything. He knows what to do. He knows what you mean. He knows. I mean, sometimes there's stuff that is not especially clear, and the guy knows what to do, when to do it. And
well, you're nice, because I art direct the hell out of Dave. I do, and I'm always very grateful that he takes notes, and I do have a very specific idea in mind, and like Dave is absolutely brilliant. He's amazing, hands down, my favorite colorist, and my second favorite colorist actually works in the same house as him. It's his wife, Michelle. I've worked with her quite a bit as well, and so, but yeah, I'm pretty specific about what I'm looking for. So thankfully, both Dave and Michelle are open to that, and it's kind of just a feeling out process, because once they sort of, after a few pages, they get sort of what I'm looking for, and then it's much less note heavy.
Troy, yeah, did Dave color the Black Sinister work?
No, Dave McCaig colored Black Sinister, but Dave Stewart colored Trout.
That's where I was confused. Sorry, I was going to use that as a segue to the Black Sinister cover, but I'm like, because I wasn't 100% sure. But yeah, that makes more sense now.
Well, it could segue to the Trout cover.
That's true. Oh yeah, because we have that as well.
Yeah.
Well, let's start with that. We'll kind of. Oh, Ryan, comic guy, how you doing, man? Ryan, I was on his live. We're gonna get him on here soon, because Ryan actually educated me quite a bit on kind of the variant cover market, how the comic markets work. Because being an art, you kind of forget that there's another side to the coin, the actual comics and the collectability, and it's really cool and unique. But how you doing, Ryan? Glad you're on board. Okay,
Jason Moore is here too. Jason, he's an inker. He's been around for quite a while. He's a good dude.
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
Yeah, Jason, he messaged earlier today and said he was going to be tuning in. So glad you guys are here. And just give me 1 second to get this.
I'm on my iPad and I don't see the chat.
Oh, I clicked it over. So there's two columns. There's a private chat and a live comment. So I just flipped it over to the live comments.
Yeah.
And yeah.
If I open the chat, it covers the whole screen.
Oh.
Right now.
Well, if there's anything pertinent, we'll let you know.
Yeah, then you don't have to look at us. Okay, so let's go. Speaking of Troy and Dave Stewart and Trout, #1.
There it is. So this series was a long time in coming. The previous Trout work came out, the first ever Trout stuff came out in Dark Horse Presents back in the late 90s. And then the 2-issue Trout miniseries I did for Oni came out, I should have looked at the dates, early 2000s. And it was collected in a nice little hardcover by Dark Horse before this new series came out. So that I decided that because they were going to bring out the old material, that I would tie in some of the previous content to this new series. It probably did baffle some readers. I just decided to jump in and tie it all together. So it probably was a little confusing to some readers who didn't read the previous work, but it was important. The sort of foil to Trout was important to bring him through this new story and resolve that. So I just jumped in with both feet. And so this Trout is probably my most personal work. So deciding on the covers for the new series wasn't easy. I really went back and forth on deciding what would be the best pursuit. It's kind of a creepy horror cerebral thing, so action covers didn't really work. I really let it sit for a while as I just sort of continued writing the series. I had it pretty heavily plotted before I jumped into the first issue. But then it came a time where I had to get a cover done because we had to solicit it. And I thought, I always like drawing sort of portraits of characters, almost like they're posing for a photograph. And that was the impetus for the covers for the whole series, all 4 issues. And with the first cover, I sort of just picked the players that appeared in that issue. And sort of put him in a setting that, especially for the first two covers, are a little unsettling, but it is sort of a very staged, almost sitting for a portrait. And but it's but of course still trying to create an emotion with the characters of how they're feeling in the story. So with Trout and Giuseppe, Giuseppe's pretty much sick through the whole 4 issues, and Trout is Trout, so he's always sort of very kind of timid and afraid, just very much in his head. And then the Bacon character over Giuseppe's left shoulder, although he helps them at a point in the stories, it's never like he's a huge ally. And then the other characters are just sort of bad characters in the story. And so surrounding them with these characters who mean them, harm or ill will, really it came together when I started doing the roughs, and it's like, oh, if you put the creepy guys around them, it really creates the mood. And I still really like the covers. Usually at time I'm kind of like, oh, I wish I could have those back and do something different, but I think they turned out really well, and they sort of get lighter in tone purposefully through the 4 issues until the end. So you have Trout kind of with a lot of thread around him, and then in the 4th issue, which unfortunately we don't have up, but it's a very sort of happy, familial, sort of loving cover, which sort of wraps up his journey through the story, but told also through the covers.
Well, that's interesting, Troy. I think especially, just setting the stage like a family portrait with all these obviously ill-willed characters around them. I think it does, especially you talking about it, it does create that sense of dread, even though it's not your prototypical, it's not a guy sneaking around a corner or coming out of the shadows. It's just very, well, and I think it was, and this isn't really that relevant, but I think it's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 movie poster is the Breakfast Club, except it's all the horrible characters.
Yeah.
in the Breakfast, and it's kind of that same idea where it's like this pose, this friendly thing, but with more. But I feel like yours has almost less humor and more dread than like the Chainsaw Massacre one would, because that's meant to be strictly humorous. But.
Yeah. Well, and with this too, because it is sort of a dark fairy tale, and it takes place in sort of an Edwardian era, in terms of just visually, what I pulled from historically, in terms of costumes and that kind of thing, even though I play with a lot of era stuff in terms of that. And so I thought that it evoked kind of a dark fairy tale feeling, this idea of these sort of posed, forced kind of creepy covers. And like I said, as they sort of get lighter as the story progresses. And even though I was sort of joking around how sort of heavy-handed I was in terms of look and feel with Dave, working with Dave also really emboldened me to do some things that I wouldn't have been comfortable doing, but because I knew he was going to be coming on as a colorist, I really was able to push myself. There's a lot of color cues that are used, and some are very subtle, as important storytelling elements in the series. And Dave stuck the landing on all of them. And it's definitely a book where you read it. There's a lot of metaphors, visual metaphors. There's a lot of implied stuff. There's a lot of stuff that it just kind of really only makes sense to me because of what the characters in the story represents. But it still is engaging enough to follow these characters on this sort of really surreal journey. And there's a happy ending. I'm not spoiling anything. That was always the intention from the beginning, was to give him a happy ending. And but yeah, so working with Dave and really being able to go into this and put in a lot of detail, a lot of stuff. I mean, there's a lot of stuff on, especially the first and second cover, and knowing, like you said, Gerardo, that Dave is amazing, and he knows light and what to do with it. And I was thrilled when I saw this cover. There was very little corrections or sort of notes that I sent back on this first cover. He pretty much nailed it right off the bat.
Yeah, I love how these covers that you can, even if you don't know the characters, you can tell the personality of each character, and you can sort of almost even imagine their backstories just by looking at them. Especially, I mean, in all your work, you give characters so much personality, and I think they complements that greatly, especially in interiors.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you for that. Yeah. I mean, to me, it was funny because I had a hiatus in comics, I guess, for a while where I was focusing on movie stuff. I actually directed a movie back in 2009 that came out wide in 2011, and working with actors was an amazing experience. It was because I up to that point I had made a short film, and obviously had worked with there's only two characters in the entire short. Two live characters in the entire short. And so working with some really amazing actors, I was able to carry that over into comic work when I came back to comics, and really understanding how important acting is in your characters and giving them those performances. Like, you go back to the Cosmic Ghostwriter cover, the first one that you showed, Cam, and the character is just really, like, you could tell everything about him by how he's sitting on this pile of defeated heroes. And, like, you talk about performance, Gerardo, like, you nailed it with that character. You know everything about him just in that pose. Like, he's very saucy and and how he's sitting there on everyone, and kind of quite smug in his accomplishments. So it does. I think it's a really important aspect. And it's the one thing that when younger cartoonists, when they ask something, you just sort of say, really, because on the day in movies, when you're directing, your most important role is, in fact, working with the actors, getting the performance that you both want. And there's a lot of that with the characters in your comics too. You want to respect their journey and what they're doing, and you have to honor who they are, and hopefully represent them the best way possible on the page.
Yeah. What I love about your covers, especially the Trout covers, is that they're just standing or sitting, but by the way you work by the way you drew them, you can tell the personality, even if there's not much acting. They're just posing, basically.
Yeah.
And you still can see the expression. I think that's very striking. I love that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and especially, like, I think on the first cover, you understand without reading it that there's a relationship between our two protagonists in the middle of the image, that there's a bond there, and it's almost like Trout on the first cover is protecting Giuseppe, who ends up, as you find out, he's quite ill, especially at the beginning of the series. And so there is that connection there, and hopefully I pulled it off where you do, or, you're getting a little sense of each character and the role that they'll play.
Yeah.
Awesome, guys. So I'm going to throw a little curveball at you both, just because
Okay.
our pal Dylan is on. And Dylan has actually commissioned both of you guys for 2 outstanding pieces. So we're going to go to what he got.
Outstanding is in the quality that he expects, or outstanding that we haven't turned him in yet?
No, that are completed and in his hands. So
okay.
just each, don't worry too much about it, but just take a couple minutes, speak to the piece. We'll go to Gerardo's Conan, and then we'll go to your Rick and Morty right after, Troy. I just had to
cool. Okay.
find the images. So first up, Gerardo, this was the first commission you had done on the most recent list. Dylan says they're very much in my hands. And let's, right there. there is Conan.
That's so awesome.
So Gerardo, maybe you just want to take a second to explain to Dylan what your approach was with this. I know I bring up Troy's pieces and your pieces, quite often because in the live streams have been with both of you, and obviously Rick and Morty, Frankenstein pieces, everything that you guys have done, the Conan pieces, I speak to a lot, but these guys might want to hear your perspective, because I'm probably way off base with some of the stuff I say. So, yeah. So your approach to this one, Zaff? We all know how you like to draw Conan, but
clearly,
I'll leave the floor to you.
Well, actually, whenever I draw Conan, there's not much thinking involved. It's more. I know what I want to show Conan doing, and the kind of mood I want to give him. I purposely never give him a helmet. I always wanted to be, almost defeated but still pushing through. So if I can do that forever, I will do that forever with Conan. And it's basically one of my favorite things to draw. So it comes naturally.
So when you're going into this, because you really use a lot of different techniques in your work. Like I have like 3 pens that I use. I'm very specific about that. But you're using washes and you're using tons of hatching, which is amazing. Like your hatching is what I try to achieve, and hopefully when I'm adult I'll get there. And you're using, and I kind of railed on whiteout, because for me whiteout is I've made a mistake, but you use it as a tool. Like you're using paint, using white paint, going in and creating textures and tones with it. And so do you sort of have that map going in when you see the image in your head and you know what you're going to do? This is like, okay, this section is going to be washes, this section is going to be hatching, and throw in some white paint there? Or is it just all kind of spontaneous as you're going?
No, I basically, what I see is values.
Okay,
for
yeah.
instance, so I see the value. I know I need a gray here. And as I progress on the piece, I decide almost, it's almost a natural way of deciding if I'm going to do a hatching, or if I'm going to do a wash, or if I'm going to try to do another. Sometimes I would I go with wash with white acrylics or anything like that over the inks before they dry, so it gives a little gray feel, a gray tone. I have a lot of different ways to approach the values that I wanna give, but I do that on the go. I don't plan ahead all that stuff.
Well, what I love about this piece is like everything just directs you to his face. It's just like you just kind of are. It's kind of like a really nice push into his face. It just leads there to that look, like how you described you love drawing him, and it's just so perfectly captured there.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, I wanted to leave the face basically. I didn't want to do extra rendering on the face.
Mm-hmm.
I just want like a couple of dots of light, yeah. This was one of my favorite commissions to tackle, because I had a lot of fun, because I was missing Conan already. I haven't seen him in a while by this point, and yeah, I love the character, and it always brings out the best I can.
Well, and Dylan just suggested that he loves how cold this piece looks, and there's 2 Canadians on this conversation, and I can speak for Cam. We both feel the same way. It's like, it just very much we know exactly how that would be, you know. And I just like, you just see like those trees just pushing into the distance, you know. You just sort of feel that snow blowing across. It's wonderful.
In the beginning, I wanted to go with snow because I had this image of the figure almost in shadows, and everything was reflected. The shape would be, sort of as it is. You have all the values, the different values in the shadows. So I wanted to do that, and the snow is a perfect reflective surface for that. So that's where that comes from. And I have done the Conan the Barbarian 8, which was a snowy issue. So
Yeah.
I did that, and I wanted to go that way. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome, guys. Well, obviously I love that piece. And I also love this other piece we're going to share here in 1 second. Sorry, I'm jumping around a bit, fellas. Troy, you are up.
There we go.
So this was the first commission I think you took with us. My apologies, Troy. This might be the slightly darkened version.
That's all right. That's all right.
Scan.
Yeah, I think I sent you two. Yeah, it's when the Rick and Morty request came through, I was very excited. I'm a big fan of Rick and Morty, and actually had done a couple Rick and Morty covers for Oni, and had sort of poked them to do some more, and they said, well, we'll add you to the list. Everyone wants to do Rick and Morty covers, and that was it. Like, I was given really free reign beyond. Well, they wanted what's his name? The guy in the foreground,
Mr. Poopy Butthole.
Yes, thank you. That was sort of the only request, was that he be in there as well. But other than that, I sort of had real free reign, and as a big fan of the show, I really I wanted to capture their likeness, because I think that's important to sort of keep them somewhat familiar looking in regards to the show. But then, because then that allows me to do completely 100% me with the rest of it. And so that's what it was. Because I mean, it's such a ridiculous, over the top show, and just thinking about what kind of world would they end up on, and what kind of situation would they be in when they got there. And it was just a lot of madness, and creating sort of different, this world of death, like everything is after them. And same thing, Gerardo, sort of trying to find those values there, but really trying to focus on Rick and Morty mostly, and drawing that attention to them, and succeeded for the most part. I hadn't done hatching in quite a while, and so I was sort of refamiliarizing myself to it, and but I was still really happy with this one, really stoked with how it turned out. And it sort of, I guess I sort of set a precedent with myself with the commissions, that, well, this is the level of noodling, I'll call it noodling, that people are going to expect. So, but happy to have tackled this one. It was a lot of fun.
It's amazing. I love the composition in this one.
Yeah,
I love the hatching and everything, but the composition really puts it all together, because it's so hard. Have so much detail everywhere and still be able to see things clearly. That's amazing.
And two, thank you. And what I decided early on with this is that they wouldn't. I mean, the focus is on them, but they wouldn't be like 75-80% of the picture. They're quite small in there, and it allowed me to create really wonderful environments and tell a story, which I then sort of taken over into all the commissions I've done, where there is very much a story element in all the pieces that I've been working on with Cam. So it was nice to set that precedent for myself and that expectation, because then I just, having been able to roll it into the other ones has been really great. And Dylan's, he's talking about the Popeye piece, and that's sort of where it really started for me. Was I did a Popeye piece for a friend of mine, and he just really loves Popeye, and so he's fighting Bluto in a boat, and I did keep them pretty close to character. I did sort of make them a little more me, but they're they look like what they look like, and then it's just surrounded. It's, once again, they're kind of small in the piece, and then they're in these huge, massive waves with this weird tentacle monster coming out. And they're oblivious to their surroundings because they're just fighting one another, which is what they do. So there it is. And so
that's amazing.
That one's definitely a favorite still. And I love that I decided to put sound effects in a commission piece, but people seem to be okay with it. So
yeah, this one is smaller too, right?
Yeah, it's not 12 by 15. It's I can't remember, but it's sort of like 12 by 10 or something like that.
Seriously? Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, I was quite surprised at that. I thought for sure, because all I knew at that time. Sorry, Zaf, go ahead.
No. I was asking if that was all quill or all markers.
No, I use these.
Microns?
These minis. There's a little micron in there, but I use these mini zebra disposable pens. That's like 95% of that is with those.
Wow, that's amazing.
Awesome.
And they're interesting pens to use because they're a little inconsistent. You'll get one that'll last you for almost a whole piece, which is, I love those ones. And then you'll get one that the tip will start to get a little mushy after just a few hours, which is kind of annoying.
Right. Yeah, I'm super heavy-handed, so I'm used to going through. I go through, maybe for cover, I go through 2 nibs.
And what are you using? Like, are you using because you use a bunch of different stuff, right? I mean, you're using brush, but what's your sort of primary tool?
Well, I use I start almost all pieces with a Da Vinci brush.
Okay.
They're just a round brush, number 4, I think. But in Argentina, it's sort of difficult to get these brushes and quills and nibs and everything. So I work with whatever I have. I tend to rotate them with whatever I can find. Because I used to order online, but right now it's difficult to get things in. So I'm used to working with what I have. Right now it's the Da Vinci brush, and I go through nibs like crazy. I destroy them, different quills, stuff like that.
Well, and there is like and that's the thing, like with some of like, especially with those the hatching and the tones that you're doing, that I mean, there's big lines, there's thick lines, there's thin lines, and I can just see how you probably, I think Otomo was kind of the same way. I think, like, because like, I mean, there's just so much in what he does. I can see you just like throwing those nibs out as you're going along.
It's crazy, and I also use a lot of old brushes. Also almost discarded brushes.
Yeah.
That are falling apart, and I use them for textures and different things.
So, guys, while we're talking about Gerardo's cover work and his process, anyone who watched the live stream on Friday, Gerardo got permission from his editor for us to show the cover he was working on. So you're cool if I share that right now, Gerardo? A lot of people actually saw you working on that on Saturday night.
Yeah, it's eventually coming. We don't know.
Oh, wow!
But it's coming.
I apologize. I'll kind of move in and out. We'll get a closer look, and we'll take a peek at the bottom here too. But for anyone who was watching the show on Saturday, Gerardo was working on this and had had Wolverine covered up. People in the live stream might have let it slip that what the character was, considering it was a Wolverine themed live stream. But yeah, I'll leave you guys to it.
This was a fun piece to work on because I'm very shy, and I don't like to speak while I draw. But I was so comfortable the other day that it kind of flowed through, during the whole. I mean, I did almost the entire background on the live session the other day.
Oh wow!
And it just poured through. I mean, it was really fun, and it was a weird thing to do because I'm not used to that at all. I'm used to working on my cave with nothing but darkness and silence. So it was a fun change, and I like how it turned out.
And so when you're throwing in those tones, because there's a lot of different value in here that you never could have got those back before printing really went to the next level in terms of how good printing is these days. And like I'm looking at those washes of the trees through the opening, just creating this beautiful distance. But how does a colorist tackle this? Like, do they are they working transparently on that? Like, have they ever cursed you and said, "God damn it, Gerardo, what am I going to do with this?"
I imagine they have. I'm going to color this one myself.
Okay, so perfect. So you can tell us how. So how are you going to tackle this?
Yeah, I'm going to go with a very flat gray and red. Like two colors, very flat, and just going to make Wolverine pop out a little bit. And I have it in my head, but I need to iron the details out. But
so will you leave most of the image? Then will it be black and white, and you just sort of spot some colors? Is that what you're thinking, or?
Yeah, I'm deciding. I think I'm gonna see how it goes because I'm not really that good at color, so I wing it as I go. The idea I wanted to do a very flat gray all over the front of the picture, leave the back, and then do a little spots of red here and there, especially on the figure, a little dripping blood or something like that. But yeah, if they let me, I will go with flat colors. I'm not even gonna modulate the colors at all.
Well, it's remarkable, and like I said, this gets back to, I mean, you're painting essentially. You're painting with washes and ink, and so I love the idea of you just sort of picking and choosing where you add a little bit of additional value and color to even create more focus. Not that the piece needs it. It's really amazing. This is incredible.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, that's awesome. And well, and Gerardo, thanks for letting us show that. I know sharing things before solicitation and things like that is challenging. Is it just given the distribution issues and what's going on right now, the uncertainty, was that kind of why they said go ahead and share?
Yeah, I asked my editor, and he said that it was okay to show it, and he wanted me to assure everybody that it's gonna be coming to comic book stores soon. So it's gonna happen. I mean, it's everything will be coming back. I mean, I know there's a lot of worry around, distribution shutting down and everything, but I think we'll be okay. Yeah. They're still asking me for covers and stuff like that. So
that's awesome. So Jason just has a question about the paper, about the type you prefer drawing on.
Okay, yeah, I see that question. I used to go with thicker and more texture paper a while ago, but right now I'm using a very thin, almost Bristol paper, Schweller it's called, and it's very thin and very smooth. So it gives me a little bit more options to work on, because with texture paper it's harder for me to work with quills and give smoother textures. With this I can vary more. Right? I'm trying to use a smoother and thinner paper right now.
Awesome. Okay, well, the exclusive sneak peek of Gerardo's Wolverine cover, and we're going to follow that up. And there's really no sequence to the images we're using here, but what I have handy, we're going from one insanely detailed, awesome piece to another.
Ah.
When I see this, I feel like such a hack.
I felt the same when I looked at your cover. Yeah, this was fun. This was fun, but also incredibly stressful.
Well, Troy, and before you guys get into it, I just want to provide just my 2 cents, because there's been a few interesting points that have come up with Dylan saying he can feel the cold of the Conan piece, and I feel like both of you, especially when you're trying to capture some of that primal feel, like I feel the electricity. I feel like I'm getting shocked as I look at this picture. Like I stuck my hand in the socket when I'm a kid, and I'm getting that little zap. I can actually feel it and kind of smell it. And I think that's something that both of you guys do really well, is capturing the feel and the emotions, the senses of the piece, not just the visual aspect. But yeah, those are just my 2 cents.
Well, and I appreciate that, and it's interesting too, because this is completely made up lighting. There's no, there's 100 light sources in this thing, and this one took by far the longest so far of the pieces that I've done. I do have to do some bigger pieces, and I'm sure they'll take longer than this one. But it was really about trying to capture that pose by the monster, of the monster, and the look on his face. Like, I mean, he's slightly stunned. I wanted him to feel, this is crazy, but that there's some vulnerability in him rather than rage and almost shock. And really, I went back and forth a lot on the size of how big or small he would be in the piece, where he would be in the piece, and exactly what pose, finding that right pose. And that took a really long time. And but once
I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, Troy. How do you go about that? How do you do the sketches, and do you light box them afterwards?
Yeah, well, I draw, because I do ink on a light pad, and so I draw to make it easier for me. I actually draw on tracing paper, and I use a Canson tracing paper. It's actually really nice to draw on, and so when I made that switch of working on a light pad, I'll just go in and I'll just start working on layers, and I'll do some pieces will be rough, and it's like, oh, I can move the arm here. So it's kind of like Luddite Photoshop in that regard, because I can sort of move pieces around as I need them, and it just was version after version after version until I finally felt comfortable with how he was. And I mean, I obviously the anatomy is stretched. It's a little fantastical, but I also wanted him to look like it's quasi real, that it's not cartoony. And so it just was, once I nailed him or felt comfortable with him, then the rest just kind of fell in place. And then it was just about adding as much sort of Tesla gack as I could to add to the idea of there being, the story element to it.
Well, I think this scan is obviously the original. There's stuff in the tanks back there that the scan isn't really picking up on. The extra body parts, you can kind of see them, but the scan is just kind of cheating the image a bit, just for anyone looking.
Yeah, there's some torsos and organs hanging in there.
Yeah.
Can you zoom in at all, or is it just?
I can on this. I can go like that, or I can go to the bottom part too. Which I guess
that works.
It's funny because my favorite part of this is actually just sort of his chest and torso. I think I got the lighting really good on that, and the rest I'm happy with too. But it's just I think that that worked out really well.
Yeah, it has a Bernie vibe that I love.
Yeah, and Bernie is always, especially with this stuff. I'm doing a Swamp Thing commission right now that has a lot of Bernie love in it too. And I will never ever be him. There will only ever be Dylan. There will only ever be one Bernie Wrightson, and but it's nice to sort of homage him in regards to especially the horror monster stuff, and just give a bit of a nod to his brilliance. And I've been fortunate to see a bunch of those Frankenstein originals in person, and as brilliant and as beautiful as they are in print form, it doesn't even come close to what they look like in real life.
That's usually the case with everything. Right?
Yeah, well, it's true. Yeah. But I just saw them and I was like, what?
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
When if you have $750,000 or $1 million, you could buy one. So
oh my God, is that what they're worth?
Well, that one most recent one that went into auction, which was the prime one, I think I showed it to you, Troy, when it went to auction. It went for something insane.
Oh, because I know someone that has like 4 or 5 of them.
Well, and I often say this too, like everyone talks about kind of what the cream of the crop is, or what's the next big thing for just in terms of dollar value with art. And I always thought that Bernie's Frankenstein deserves kind of to be the king of the castle, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. That's because that's going back to the classic illustrators, and what they used to do, and it's a bit of a lost art now. It's not something that everyone tackles, and that just sort of seemed to happen at a perfect time in Bernie's life in terms of where he was creatively, and as well as sort of diminishing abilities. He hadn't really, because we all, we get better at things as we get older, but we also sort of slip in some things as we get older. And at least I'm finding that at 48, there's things that I used to be able to do that I just can't do anymore. And so with that Frankenstein project, it just everything came together at the right time. I don't know. I'm speculating. It just feels like that when you look at it, and it's absolutely remarkable. Like just absolutely remarkable. Those images.
Yeah, those are on a different level entirely.
Yeah, like I can't even wrap my head around. Like because you do. It's like while baseball players play baseball, some play in the minor leagues and some play in the MLB, and that's kind of the same. So you understand baseball, but you're not going to get big poppy numbers. You know what I'm saying? And it's kind of the same thing. You look at Bernie's stuff, and it's like, well, I know how he does it. I'm never going to achieve that, but it's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, guys. Well, let's we'll move on here to our next viewing, which will be another prominent cover of Gerardo's, which I get asked about every day of the week, and I ask Gerardo about every day of the week. Are
they asking if it's available? Is that the question?
Yeah. And I'm asking Gerardo if it's available for my own selfish reasons. I know it's not going anywhere, so I just like to harass him a bit. But Hawkman.
I knew it was going to be this one.
Yeah, well, I figured I needed to keep something, because I was sending you batches and batches of stuff, and it came to a point where I said I want to keep something. I want to keep something for not only for me but for my daughter, and this seemed like a good starting point, because there were some covers that I wanted to keep before, and usually you guys talk me out of it. It happened, it happened. It wouldn't be the first time. So I'm trying to hold on to this as much as I can.
Well, and it's this one's it's such an interesting one too, because we were just chatting the one day, a group of us, and you kind of showed us the layout, and I remember anxiously awaiting the inks, and I was trying to make sense of where your inspiration came from for this one, and I was way off base, but I was I don't know if I was chatting to someone else. I think Ryan and I were just chatting about something else on chat later, and I said, I'm like, oh man, that Hawkman looks really good that Gerardo's working on, because I know you were kind of feeling your way through it, and I just remember telling Ryan, geez, that looks nice, and then you were updating the process as you went along, and yeah, the rest is history. But
yeah, there wasn't a conscious inspiration for this one. People pointed out that it looked like one of the Frank Miller Dark Knight Returns covers. They also pointed out that it kind of looked like the Batman piece by my father, by my dad.
Yeah.
So it kind of has the same vibe, and yeah, it might be unconscious. It might be. It didn't have a conscious inspiration per se. I was sort of fooling around. I had this image in my head that I wanted to do, and I was transforming the sketch digitally to make it fit that idea. And yeah, that's what we came up with. I like.
And then they had to slap a logo on that and cover up a bunch of good stuff.
No, actually, these variants, DC prints these variants without a trade dress.
Oh, really? Oh, wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
They just have a little DC logo and the names of the authors inside.
Oh,
So
that's cool.
That's why I could do the face. So
Yeah, I wonder. Yeah.
Popping out of the page. Yeah, that is fun.
Well, and I remember in our last chat, because you said that Hawkman wasn't a character that really had resonated with you before, if I remember remembering correctly. I hope I'm not wrong with that, but yeah. And so for you to then, so was this the first Hawkman cover that you did?
No, it was the second one.
Okay, but still very early in sort of your incarnation of working with a character that you really didn't particularly have strong feelings for, and certainly that does not show in the work. I mean, this is remarkable. There's so much. Your work always, for me, resonates a ton of mood. There's always just so much mood in your work, and I love it. Like, I wish I could put half of what you put in yours in mine, and so seeing a character that that you're like, well, it's Hawkman, and then coming up with this is just it's just remarkable that you're able to even push through and create something like this. Is a really iconic image. Like, this is something that people, when they talk about this character, will bring up as an example of who he can be and what he can
Oh, thank you, man. Thanks. Yeah, I actually well, since I was such an outsider to the character, I think that's probably why I could go this way with it. Because when you're, I think maybe when you're familiar with the character, you tend to have a preconceived idea about it, and you go a certain way. And I tackled Hawkman as I was tackling, I don't know, Conan or Viking or something like that. And I don't know exactly how much does that have to do with the character, but I mean, I'm so thankful to my editor to letting me, just roll with it.
Well, and it's
So
interesting because it reminds me of, and so Hawkman, the same thing. Like he never really resonated with me very much from back when I was, reading a lot of DC stuff. But then Tim Truman worked on a Hawkman series, and I'm
uh,
blanking on the name of it, but he approached him in the same way, like he was like a Viking or a barbarian, and that to me made a lot more sense than sort of the
yeah,
slick versions of Hawkman that we've seen. So.
yeah, that was amazing.
Oh,
I'm,
Jason's bringing up this.
oh,
So I did some Dead World way back in the day, or as I like to call it, The Walking Dead, the first version.
the original, the original
Yeah, the
Walking Dead.
original. Yeah, you would
Uh,
do a very cool King Zombie. He was kind of a biker zombie with a flat top and a mullet and the bandana and the shades and leather coat. You would do a
Well,
pretty amazing King Zombie.
I'm gonna have to research that.
Yeah.
We have an outstanding art trade, so
That's yes.
let's see how that goes.
well, I want you guys
More
to
than one piece.
when Gerardo comes to Calgary, you guys can suit up in the studio and do them together.
Well, I think I'm actually really excited to draw Gerardo's. It's been in my head it's taking up space in my brain right now, and I keep when I'm working on
Same
other stuff,
here.
I'll look up into my head and it's like, oh, I'm just going to draw it. So it's Gerardo's is probably going to happen sooner rather than later, and it's going to be really fun. Like it's what we discussed. We're not going to tell anybody because it'll just be a surprise. But there's going to be some other elements to it, I think, that are going to be a lot of fun, and it's going to be really, really cool to do.
I have a
Awesome.
pretty clear idea of what I'm gonna do as well. So
Oh, excellent. Excellent.
Okay, well, moving on. I guess we'll do just kind of finish up. Troy, we're gonna wanted to speak to some more process elements with your Black Sinister work, Troy. So, without further ado, here is it's kind of wonky. It's far away. Then I'll zoom in, but
Yeah, so this was the first version I did of the character, the Black Sinister. So Kari and I are actually going to do a little video about the Black Sinister. So I'll let you know when we do that. Mike Richardson at Dark Horse has graciously allowed us to share the Black Sinister online. So when we get that put together, we'll put it out there and people will be able to read it for free. We'll have a site there people can go. And the Black Sinister was the first sort of larger project I did, and by larger I mean it's only 48 pages long, but that I did coming off of the movie stuff. I did a creepy story, and I did an eerie story, and then I did a Lobster Johnson one shot, and then this was sort of the first original creator-owned project. And I had a nucleus of an idea of what I wanted to do, and I wasn't feeling so confident that I could just tackle it myself. So Kari is my best friend. I've known Kari for like half my life, and approached him and asked him if he wanted to write it. We had collaborated just a tiny little bit in the past, and what was great was he took sort of my smaller ideas and then turned it into this big crazy thing. And when that happened, then it was off to the races. We were just throwing stuff back and forth and had a lot of fun with this. But this was a very early version of the character, sort of a pitch piece that we sent to Dark Horse, and Kari actually colored it. He did the sort of the design of the logo, and pardon me, I drew the bullets, and he sort of put the whole thing together. And then if we can go to the second image, and then so this is a much stronger version of it. So this is what I did when it was approved to run it. It originally ran in Dark Horse Presents, which was fun because I had, started off at Dark Horse in Dark Horse Presents. So it was cool to do another story in Dark Horse Presents, and it was taking the original concept that I did and just really elevating it. And it's sort of the first time that I've ever, because I don't do this really at all, I don't ever redraw something. I've drawn it, that's how it exists. But I felt like I could do a much stronger version of this image. I really liked the image and knew that I wanted it to be because we got one cover for Dark Horse Presents, and then it ended up being also the collection cover for the hardcover. And so the hand and the gun are the same. I just went in and really really brought that up in terms of the inking. And then I just did a whole new version of him in the background. And Dave McCaig, so this was working with Dave McCaig on the Black Sinister, and he came in and did all that wonderful, rim lighting and everything else. And I just like this creepy idea of him sort of licking the smoke or tasting the smoke as it kind of filters out through the barrel of his rather ridiculously large gun. But it's interesting to me, and why I wanted to talk about it, because there are artists who will redraw the same thing time after time after time. Like Hergé, for instance, is did multiple versions of a lot of his tales, and he's drawn Tintin stories, and then 15, 20 years later, he'll just redraw a whole new version of it. And obviously it's much stronger because he's developed as an artist. And so it's interesting in that sense that it's not something I do very often, but when I did this, I'm really happy that I did. I think it's a much, much stronger image than the first one that we showed. And once again, it is sort of capturing that character. I mean, he's, the idea is, it's satire. I mean, he's a billionaire, and he's sort of the self-appointed protector of a city, but he causes more harm than he does, good. And the city sort of revolts as a consequence of his actions. And so we had a lot of fun. It's really over the top. It's really, some people hate it, and I think they kind of missed the joke. But we really enjoyed it. I'd love to do more with the character, to be honest with you.
Yeah, the one, it's such a interesting book, and it sets a tone right off the start. Like, you guys aren't making any. It's not subtle in how you're trying to make this character appear, which is awesome, and it's equal parts hilarious and super dark at the same time too. It's a very cool read. I really enjoyed it. Troy gifted me a copy, so thank you for that, Troy.
Well, Gerardo will probably get one in the mail at some point too. So, Gerardo, have you ever gone in and redrawn a previous image, or?
No, not really. I usually once I finish a piece and I'm happy with it, I go back at it the next day, and I already lose all sort of interest in it. In reworking and doing more stuff. I think I sort of see everything wrong with it, and I kind of incorporate it to the next one.
Yeah.
But I try not to go back.
Yeah, I mean, I expel a lot of energy in my work, and it's tough. Like, I knew that I had to with this one. I knew there was a better version of it, but like I said, like, normally I can't. Like, I've left it on the page. It's there. It exists, right. Good or bad. So.
Right, exactly, and I think it's part of the process of growing up, right, as an artist. Because,
yeah, I mean, there's.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, sorry. Go ahead, Zaffino. Sorry, Gerardo, I cut you off there. Sorry.
No. I mean, you kind of see everything that's wrong with it after I finish, and I feel like it is what it is, and it's a period. It's a part of that day, that particular moment that I was doing it, and I try to incorporate everything I learned on the next one, and so on, so on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually never did that. I never went back to previous image.
Well, and it's interesting too, because at some point, because you work as a professional artist, you work in publishing. At some points, an image just has to exist. You have to be done with it. You have to put it, aside. You can't take more time with it, even if you want to. You just have to know when something's done, and even if it's not a slam dunk every time. If you're getting a really nice layup, sometimes that's all you can, you have time to, you have time for. So,
right, and I see. I mean, I don't know exactly how to explain this, but I don't see that exactly as a bad thing.
Oh no,
I understand what you mean with this image, because it's sort of a very personal project for you. So I understand, and I would have done the same if I wasn't, if I thought that I could do it better. But I think when you leave an image with some mistakes that you see, probably sometimes you see them, but other people don't, and so that's one aspect of it. But I think the image, the flawed image, it speaks for itself. It's part of your history, and it's part of your process and your growth as an artist.
For sure.
I don't know if that made any sense, but
no, it totally did. And in the case of this one, because the first image I did of him was just intended as a pitch image, and so when we got approval in Dark Horse Presents, to do the story, it's like, okay, well, you get a cover with the first chapter. And so because I still really found the image striking, the idea of it, I think to me it was sort of the tasting of the smoke that I really liked. I think it summed him up. And I said, well, instead of doing a whole new image for the covers, like, I'm just going to do a better version of this. And yeah, like you said, like, this is the only time in my 29-year career that I've redrawn an image that I've already done. And it worked here. It's not something that I readily am eager to replicate, to do again. It's not like something's like, oh, I'm just going to keep redoing the same image over and over again until it's perfect. That just sounds exhausting.
Right. Were you able to print the original image in the book, at least as a Easter egg or something?
No, I don't think it is in the back. I think that I got it right here. I don't think we printed any. We printed a few extras, but I don't think that one. Let me see. Oh no, it is in there. It is in there. Yeah.
Oh yeah. That makes sense. That is perfect.
And it's funny because it's just it's a 48-page story, which is really only 2 issues. I think we originally had pitched it as a 4-issue miniseries, and then we heard back that they didn't want to do anything that long, but that we could do another serial in Dark Horse Presents. And then that we really worked with the idea of it being cut into 8-page segments. And Kari sort of writing that intro and that outro. It's like, stay tuned for the next episode kind of vibe. So
that's awesome.
Awesome, guys. Well, that kind of, I think, sums up the conversation for tonight. I said we kind of run an hour or a little more. Thanks, guys. That was really insightful. There was a lot I learned, and I talk to you guys constantly. So it's interesting because we do a lot of collector banter. The Saturday night stream is more collector banter focused, and there's a lot to learn from hearing 2 artists, especially guys of your guys' stature, discussing it, because there's just things that we would never ever look to pick out in a piece, even if it's not process. It's just the visual of the piece itself, because even the licking of the smoke with the Black Sinister and how that was a preference and stuff like that. It's really cool. But we have one more question, just from Jason before we go here.
Yes, I am. Well, it's not quite twice as 11 by 17, but the live area, and so I'm sort of working more European style, where I cut the pages along the gutter just for ease of inking. So the live area is, oh geez, because I haven't drawn a page in a little bit, 19 3/4 by 23 1/4. No, what is it now? I completely forget. It's big.
Yeah,
it's really big. I don't have one sitting here. Just a minute. Just a second. Hold on. Bear with me a second.
I can't find portfolios to fit Troy's work. that's how big it is.
There's a page.
Oh, awesome.
Jesus Christ.
They're huge. Here, I'll measure it. I got a ruler right here. It is live area 13 1/4 by 19 3/4. So it's not like it's not like it's 3 times bigger than a normal comic page, but it's still pretty big.
It's still huge.
But you
more elbow room.
Do you go full bleed on that?
No, I started working sort of more in the traditional just boxes, no full bleeds. And so this page is actually trimmed right in the middle here. And so I just ink halves or a third, depending on the grids that I have on a page. And so I'm not having to like reach way over my light pad.
Right.
And, yeah, it's just, I love the extra elbow room. Black Sinister was drawn on 11 by 17. And I really wish that I had worked larger on that project. There's just a lot of chaos in it, and it would have been a lot easier to sort of get that energy on larger paper.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, that's it. That's all for tonight. We'll be coming at you next Wednesday and Saturday night as well. Lots of surprises on the way. I know people are sitting at home bored in some cases, so we're trying to keep the cool content coming. We'd always planned on doing a lot more of this stuff. So thanks to Troy and Gerardo. I know you guys are very busy, so happy that you guys agreed to do this. And yeah, hit us up. Inky Knuckles, plenty of great art from these guys available. And never hesitate to email me, cam@inkyknuckles.com, if you're after anything.
And just to Dylan, I saw Dylan's question about signed stuff. So Dylan, we are planning a bunch of stuff down the road with signed books and sketches and books and stuff like that. So, yeah. And thank you guys. It was a lot of fun.
Well, I'll force these guys into a sketch duel next time. Not that I can force them into anything.
I wouldn't dare.
Awesome, guys.
Awesome.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Thanks, you too.
There, we're not live anymore.
Okay. That was good.
Awesome, guys.
Yeah.
That was great.
I think we are still live, right?
Oh, we are still live. Oh, geez.